Have you ever found yourself chasing after someone, trying to make things work, only to feel like you're the one putting in all the effort? It's easy to fall into that trap, but here's the thing, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a relationship is to walk away. There's an old saying, sometimes you have to walk away to see if they'll chase you. It might sound counterintuitive, but it holds a key truth about attraction and value. In this video, I'm going to explain why walking away is not only powerful but incredibly attractive. You'll discover how stepping back can shift the dynamic, make her realize your worth, and ultimately create the space for a stronger, more balanced connection. Stick with me until the end, because these insights will transform how you approach relationships and help you master the art of emotional control. It demonstrates self-respect and emotional strength. It's wild, isn't it? The idea that walking away from a situation, especially when it feels like you're supposed to fight for it, can actually be a sign of self-respect and emotional strength. Most of us are taught that sticking it out, being the one who holds on when everything else is crumbling, is the ultimate display of strength. But that's not always true. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is just walk away. I remember a time in my life when I was in a situation, couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, but it felt off. Maybe you've been there too, that tug of war between wanting to stay and believing you should walk. I was scared, honestly. Scared that walking away would make me seem weak. Like I'd failed. Like I wasn't strong enough to make it work. It wasn't until I heard a quote from the poet and writer Maya Angelou that things clicked for me. She said, "We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated." It wasn't about sticking around just for the sake of it. It was about knowing when to step back, preserve my dignity, and give myself the space to heal and grow. When you walk away, it's not about quitting. It's not about being afraid of conflict or responsibility. It's about choosing you. Choosing your mental health, your peace of mind, your happiness. And let me tell you, that's one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself. Think about it for a second. Every time we settle, every time we stay in a situation that drains us, whether it's a toxic relationship, a job we hate, or a friendship that no longer serves us, we're saying we don't deserve better. We're telling the universe, I'll take whatever you give me, even if it's not what I need to thrive. Walking away, though, that's a declaration. It's a quiet but firm statement. I respect myself enough to choose what's good for me. I'm not willing to sacrifice my peace just to please someone else. I've heard people say, well, isn't it about compromise? Sure, but there's a fine line between compromise and self-compromise. When you start compromising who you are, your values, your emotional health, well, that's where things get tricky. Walking away demonstrates that you are emotionally mature enough to acknowledge when something is no longer serving you. It takes courage to say, I deserve more than this. I'm not going to settle for anything less than what makes me whole. And emotionally, it's a game changer. I once walked away from a situation that I thought was the one. It felt like the right choice, but also like the hardest thing I'd ever done. But looking back, it was one of the best decisions I made. I realized that true strength isn't about holding onto something because of fear, it's about knowing when to let go because you deserve peace. There's a unique power in that, an internal strength that doesn't come from external validation, but from a deep, personal respect for who you are and what you need. It's not easy, but it is empowering. When you can walk away, you stop letting others define your worth. And that, my friend, is what true emotional strength looks like. It shows you're not desperate for validation or approval. There's something almost magnetic about someone who isn't desperate for validation or approval. You've probably noticed it yourself. It's like they walk into a room and it's as if the air shifts. They don't need anyone else's permission to feel good about who they are. That level of self-assurance is powerful. It's attractive, not because it's loud or flashy, but because it's quietly confident. I can't help but think back to a time when I was stuck in the cycle of seeking approval. It was exhausting. I'd often find myself trying so hard to fit into other people's expectations. Whether it was trying to make a relationship work or striving for a certain status at work, I was constantly looking for signs of approval. I needed to know I was doing the right thing, that I was enough. I think that's something a lot of us fall into, right? Seeking validation becomes a habit, sometimes without even realizing it. But here's the thing, when you walk away from something or someone, especially when you're not getting the recognition you crave, it's like breaking free from the chains of needing constant validation. It's an act of freedom. You're saying, I don't need your applause to feel worthy. I'm already enough. I remember a time when I was in a relationship that wasn't fulfilling. I kept trying to make it work because I didn't want to feel like a failure. Every argument or misunderstanding, I tried harder to prove my worth, to show that I was valuable enough to be chosen. But deep down, I knew something was off. It was when I walked away that I realized something profound. I didn't need anyone else's approval to be happy or whole. That was a turning point. I didn't need someone else's validation to tell me I was worthy of love or success. I could choose to believe that for myself. And that was liberating. Now, I see how important it is to resist that constant craving for approval. It's like trying to fill a cup with a hole in the bottom, it just doesn't work. You can keep seeking validation from others, but it'll never be enough. You'll always want more. The secret lies in learning to validate yourself. When you walk away from a situation that doesn't serve you, it's a declaration that you're not desperate for someone else's opinion. You don't need to beg for someone to see your worth because you already know it. Psychologically, this is where true self-respect comes in. You stop attaching your sense of self to external factors. When you're constantly seeking approval, you're putting your value in the hands of someone else. But when you stop, you take your power back. And that's what's attractive, being able to stand on your own 2 feet without needing the validation of others. It's funny, the more I learn about myself and about human behavior, the more I realize that the people who are truly at peace with themselves are the ones who are never clamoring for attention. They're not desperate to prove anything because they already know their worth. And there's something magnetic about that kind of energy. It's quiet but undeniable. So, walking away? It's not about giving up, it's about preserving your sense of self. It's about saying, I'm good enough, and I don't need you to tell me that. When you stop looking for validation, you become your own source of strength, and trust me, that's a power no one can take from you. It creates a sense of mystery and intrigue. You know, there's something incredibly magnetic about mystery. It's like a puzzle, something we want to figure out, but we know we can't just solve it with one glance. It's what keeps us coming back for more, isn't it? And when you walk away from a situation, whether it's a relationship, a job, or any other circumstance that's draining your energy, it creates this aura of mystery around you. People are left wondering, what happened? Where did they go? Why did they leave? And that, my friend, is powerful. I think we've all been in situations where we've tried too hard to explain ourselves, to prove that we belong, or to convince others of our worth. It's exhausting. And it's also kind of predictable. Everyone knows what's going to happen next. You try to make it work, you do your best to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be, and eventually, you either burn out or settle. It's like everyone is reading from the same script. But when you walk away, when you make the choice to step out of the narrative that's been written for you, things shift. I had this experience with a friendship that wasn't working out. It was one of those situations where I kept trying to make it fit. I'd reach out, I'd make plans, I'd explain myself over and over again, hoping that the other person would finally see my effort. But at some point, I just stopped. I walked away. And you know what happened? They didn't know how to handle it. It left them with this huge question mark. Why? Why didn't I fight for it? Why didn't I chase after their approval? It was almost like I vanished into thin air. And that made them think, more than anything I could have said. It made them wonder about me, about what I was really thinking, about my own strength and boundaries. I wasn't playing a game. It wasn't about being cold or calculating. It was simply a realization that sometimes, the best way to get people's attention is to stop trying so hard to get it. It's a psychological truth. People are drawn to what they don't understand. The mystery of not knowing someone's next move creates an intrigue that's hard to ignore. Think about it. The most charismatic people you know aren't the ones constantly over-explaining or trying to convince others of their worth. No. They have this quiet confidence. They show up, they act with purpose, and they let their actions speak for themselves. They don't feel the need to spill their whole story at the first chance they get. And that mystery? It makes them all the more captivating. It's like a book you can't put down, but with a twist, you can't quite predict what's coming next. There's this subtle, unspoken power in leaving things open-ended. And walking away? That's the ultimate move in creating that kind of allure. It's not about being unavailable, but about setting the stage for people to appreciate your presence even more. It leaves them asking, what does this person really want? What do they stand for? What are they up to? When you can master the art of walking away, without the need for explanations or drama, it creates a level of intrigue that's so much more compelling than chasing someone's approval. It's a reminder that you're a story worth discovering, not one that's already been written for someone else. It allows you to maintain your independence and sense of self. Independence. It's one of those things that sounds simple, but can be so easily lost in the shuffle of trying to please others or fit into certain expectations. It's almost like we forget how important it is to hold on to ourselves, to maintain that sense of autonomy, especially when we get wrapped up in a relationship, a job, or a social circle that isn't really serving us anymore. But here's the kicker, walking away from situations that drain your energy is one of the most powerful ways to preserve your independence and sense of self. I've been there, struggling to find my own footing in a world that felt like it was constantly pulling me in different directions. For a while, I was trying to juggle everything, trying to meet everyone else's needs, trying to be the person everyone expected me to be, and somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I actually was. It's easy to do. When you're giving so much of yourself to others, sometimes you wake up one day and realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. I remember a time when I was in a friendship that felt more like an emotional drain than a source of support. I was always there, offering my time, listening to complaints, giving advice, but it wasn't mutual. It was like I was trying to fill a void that would never be filled. I had this constant feeling of being needed but never truly seen. One day, I decided I needed space to breathe, to reconnect with myself. I walked away, not out of anger or resentment, but because I knew that if I kept investing myself into this one-sided relationship, I'd lose myself completely. And that's the thing, right? We often don't realize how much we give away until it's too late. Our time, our energy, our focus, these are precious things. When we stay in a situation, even if it's not right for us, we give up pieces of who we are. But walking away gives you the chance to rebuild, to reconnect with what makes you you. It's a quiet rebellion against the idea that you need someone or something else to complete you. It's like the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." And that's the beauty of walking away, it's a reclaiming of freedom. It allows you to separate yourself from the noise and the expectations, to rediscover your true desires, your goals, your passions. When you let go of something or someone that's been pulling you down, you create space for your own growth. You stop being defined by others and start defining yourself. Psychologically, we're wired to seek connection, but here's the thing, true connection can only happen when we're whole. If we're constantly seeking validation or approval from others, we're already starting from a place of lack. Walking away allows you to stop being so dependent on external validation. It's like a reset button. You get to remind yourself of your worth, of your individuality, of the unique path you're on. I've realized that the people who are truly attractive, whether in relationships, friendships, or just in general, are the ones who don't lose themselves in others. They maintain that sense of independence, that sense of self, no matter what. It's magnetic because it shows strength. It shows that they're not looking for someone to fill the gaps in their lives. They're already complete, and they're just looking for people who complement them, not define them. So, when you walk away, it's not just about leaving a bad situation. It's about stepping into your own power, holding onto your independence, and saying, I am enough, just as I am. And that, my friend, is incredibly attractive. It's the kind of strength that people can't help but respect, admire, and even want to be around. It forces the other person to recognize your value and presence. Have you ever had that moment when you just decide enough is enough and walk away from something that's been draining you, only to realize how much more your absence affects the other person than you thought? It's almost like they didn't truly appreciate your value until you were no longer there. It's a wild realization. When you remove yourself from a situation, it forces the other person to take a long, hard look at what they lost. And that, in itself, can be one of the most powerful and attractive things you can do. I'll never forget a time when I was in a relationship where I was giving. I kept showing up, making the effort, trying to be the perfect partner. But it wasn't being reciprocated. The other person, for whatever reason, didn't seem to appreciate me the way I deserved. And the more I tried to prove my worth, the more I was met with indifference or, at worst, disregard. It's funny how we often mistake being present for being valued. But the reality is, sometimes people only realize what they had once it's gone. One day, after a long stretch of feeling unappreciated, I made the decision to just walk away. No drama. No big speech. Just a quiet exit from a situation that wasn't serving me anymore. And you know what? The moment I stepped away, things changed. The very next day, I started getting messages, texts, calls, asking what had happened, why I wasn't around. Suddenly, I was the one they were thinking about. It was a surreal experience, honestly. I had been the same person all along, showing up, being there, but only in my absence did they begin to realize what they'd lost. That's the power of walking away. When you remove yourself from a situation, you make the other person face the reality of your presence. You're no longer just something that's always available, someone who's always in the background. You become someone they have to actively think about, someone who isn't a given anymore. That space you create, whether it's emotional distance, physical distance, or both, forces them to reflect on the dynamic and appreciate your value in a way they never did before. It's almost like the absence highlights your importance. Psychologically, it's a known fact that we tend to undervalue things that we have in abundance. Think about it, when something is always there, it becomes part of the background noise. You don't always realize how much you rely on it until it's gone. The same applies to relationships. People don't always notice how much someone brings to the table until they're forced to deal with the empty space left behind. I've learned this lesson the hard way. Sometimes, the only way for someone to see your value is to take a step back. It's like the old saying goes, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's not just some romantic notion, there's truth to it. It's not about playing games. It's about respecting yourself enough to not settle for being taken for granted. When you walk away, you force the other person to confront the truth. This person added something valuable to my life, and now they're gone. The beauty of this is that you're not doing it for their recognition. You're doing it for you. Because in the end, you need to recognize your own value first. When you show up with that kind of self-respect, it's impossible for anyone else not to see it. You create space for them to recognize you, to truly understand what your presence brought into their life, and that's the kind of power that's both attractive and irreplaceable. So, now you understand why walking away is not just powerful, but incredibly attractive. It's about self-respect, independence, and knowing your worth. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who could use this insight, and subscribe for more content. Drop a comment below with your experiences or thoughts on walking away in relationships. Stay confident, stay strong, and I'll catch you in the next video.